I'm Robert Cardoza, and you're listening to, or you're watching, On the Street. This is the intersection of business and politics. This is where we take all of the data that comes in and just absolutely overwhelms you, put it into a funnel, see what comes out and tells you the truth, good or bad, going to tell you the truth of what's going on. You can only get that right here on the street. And you know what? It's a good thing for you to be able to make decisions right now that are going to affect your business and your personal lives. But right now, we're going to talk about the good news and the bad news. Coming up, we're going to have my favorite segment, which is the emails of the show, but let's talk about the good news and the bad news. You know, about 3 or 4 weeks ago, right here on the street, we talked about what the cost of the war in Afghanistan is costing us. We've been there for 11 or 12 years now. And I had mentioned to you that it costs us right at $5,000 a second. Then that equates way out. If you do it over a year, that equates to $1.1 trillion a month. You know, and so, or I'm sorry, not a month, $1.1 trillion a year. Does that number sound familiar to you? It should. That's exactly what our deficit is. Now, someone once asked me, what's the difference between a deficit and the national debt? Well, the deficit is what your shortfall in spending is. So, you know what, if you put your check in the bank and it's $100 and you spent $110, well, you had to go out and borrow $10, your deficit is $10. You had $10, not enough. Our deficit is $1.1 trillion a year. Our debt is the total amount that you owe. And so obviously every year, if we're upside down by $1.1 trillion, that $1.1 trillion gets added to our total debt. Right now, our debt's at about $13.6 trillion. Now, that's a bad thing, and we're coming up at about late March, I believe, where we're going to hit that spending limit that Congress has set out. That's another subject altogether. You've got to say to yourself, well, wait a minute, I don't understand this debt limit. And I don't really understand it myself, because you know what? The 14th Amendment, the third section of the 14th Amendment says that only Congress has the authority to encumber the United States, to approve spending, and to levy taxes. Well, if only Congress has that ability, when they approve spending, they also, by that third section of the 14th Amendment, have an obligation to pay the bills. Since they authorized the encumbrance, they have to pay the bill. Well, we're going to have this big fight because they're saying even though they authorize the spending, they may not want to pay the bill. Well, that's baloney. That just can't happen. You know, the last time that they got to this cliff on spending, they took us so close. They didn't go over, but they took us so close that our credit rating got downgraded. And that hurt us because it cost us more money to borrow money. And when that happened, that hurt businesses in general because they lost confidence in the United States. They lost confidence in our ability to grow in the recovery of what's going on in the recession. We can't let that happen again. But I'll tell you why they're doing it. They're using it as leverage so that Congress, whether both sides of Congress, whether they be Republican or Democrats, can meet somewhere in the middle and be realistic. You can't just add revenue, because if adding revenue just encourages you to add spending. You've got to decrease expenses, and that's what's got to go on. So when we're talking about this, that is not such a difficult thing. Because today, something we mentioned 3 or 4 weeks ago, the White House has come out and they're doing a survey. And no one, not the Republicans, not the Democrats, not the people of the United States, no one is objecting to this. They're saying, how do you feel about us having a zero presence in Afghanistan, not leaving any troops there at all, and maybe bringing them out, accelerating it, and not having it go to the end of 2014? Well, you know what it means? It means that $1 trillion deficit goes away. We no longer have the deficit. And then by having the increased revenue that's already been improved, and if we can get spending reduced, then, you know, realistically, we could take another $1 trillion a year, maybe $1.5 trillion, apply that to the national debt. If we do that, within 10 years, we would have the national debt paid down to zero. We could have a totally balanced budget. It would be terrific. And you know what it would also do? It would, if Congress enacted this, it would immediately add 2 million jobs. We would be reducing the jobless rate. How great would that be? I don't see any reason why anybody would be opposed to that. It just doesn't make any sense. Here's the bad news, though. The bad news is that Congress isn't listening. They're not paying attention. These are simple things. You know what? I don't care what you think of the Obama administration. I don't care what you think about Boehner and Reid and McConnell. I don't care about any of that. What I care about is common sense. The problem with those guys are they fight. One guy doesn't believe the other guy could have a good idea. Or one guy just wants to make sure that the other guy is not going to be successful with anything. The truth is, they all need to get together. I have a tough time thinking about 535 guys in Congress, and they all decide to leave when we were in the middle of the fiscal cliff. Left 3 people to negotiate to solve this problem. That makes no sense at all. You know, when they do that kind of stuff, we ought to stop paying them. That's how I feel. Now, I want to remind everybody, you can follow me on Facebook, Twitter, LinkedIn, on Google+. You can go right to YouTube and just search in there, On the Street, Robert Cardoza. You'll be able to get all of these segments of our show, put them all together and see what's going on. You know, the only difference between me and all the other people you watch is I have no axe to grind. I am not predisposed by one faction or the other. I'm going to tell you the truth. It may hurt, it might not hurt, but it's going to be the truth, and you can make good, valid decisions based on that. When you start thinking about what I was just talking about, getting rid of the deficit and potentially getting rid of the debt, how great is that? And the only thing standing in our way, the way I see it today, is Congress. You know what? And if they're standing in the way, maybe we should knock them out of the way. Because if we get rid of that deficit and we get rid of that national debt, can you imagine what would happen to the economy? What would happen to business? We are the greatest nation on earth. You are watching On the Street. This is the intersection of business and politics. Coming up next are my emails. You don't want to miss it. I am Robert Cardoza.